I snapped my eyes open and saw a white ceiling. I froze for 3 seconds. No. I was clearly dead. In that late-night rainstorm car crash, I even heard the sound of my own bones shattering, the steering wheel slamming into my chest, the pain making my soul tremble. I sat up abruptly, looking down at my slender hands, completely intact, no bloodstains. Then I glanced at the phone on the nightstand. The screen was lit, the date clearly reading, May 15, 2024. I stared hard at that date. I had gone back 2 years, 3 months before Celeste and I were supposed to get engaged. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the sunlight on the floor for a long time, then let out a low laugh. In my past life, how many foolish things did I do for Celeste? I chased her for 3 years, groveling like a dog. She had a weak stomach, so I crossed half the city every day to bring her homemade stomach-soothing porridge. She didn't like physical contact, so I obediently stayed within the safe zone, not even daring to hold her hand without her approval. For 3 whole years of marriage, she never once gave me a proper look. The day I died was her birthday. I had joyfully prepared a candlelit dinner, only to receive the news that she had flown abroad with her male best friend, Colin, to attend an art exhibition. On my way to the airport to confront her, a truck crashed into my car, shattering it, and my absurd previous life, into pieces. My last thought before dying was, Celeste, in the next life, I'd rather die than love you. God must have actually heard me. In his previous life, Lucas lost his life for someone who didn't love him. In this life, Lucas has only one goal: break off the engagement, let go, and cut all ties. Lucas, don't look back. At 2 in the afternoon, in the private room of a cafe, Celeste frowned slightly as she looked at me. Lucas, you're late. She was still as coldly beautiful as ever, her white shirt buttoned up tightly, exuding an air of distance that kept others at arm's length. In my past life, whenever she furrowed her brow, I would immediately panic and apologize, trying every way to cheer her up. But now, I simply pulled out a chair and sat down calmly. Celeste, let's call off the engagement. I picked up the warm water the waiter had brought, my tone utterly flat. Celeste's fingers, holding the coffee cup, stiffened abruptly. She looked up, a flicker of shock flashing through her usually calm and indifferent eyes before turning cold. Lucas, are you throwing another tantrum because I didn't go to the movies with you last week? Another condescending judgment. In my past life, whenever I showed even a hint of grievance, she would label me as unreasonable. I'm not throwing a tantrum. I met her gaze and pushed the engagement planning documents aside on the table. I'm serious. I don't love you anymore. The wedding is off. The private room fell into a deathly silence. I thought she would, as usual, sneer, stand up, and leave, tossing out a "suit yourself." But 2 seconds later, I froze. Celeste's eyes reddened at a visible speed. Large, heavy tears fell from her eyes without warning, landing with a soft thud on the dark green tablecloth. She bit her lower lip hard, her knuckles turning white from the strain, and her voice trembled with a sob I had never heard in my past life. Lucas, do you even know what you're saying? You said you'd wait for me for the rest of your life. How can you so easily say you don't want this anymore? Watching this scene before me, a strange sense of absurdity crept into my mind. Why is she crying? In my past life, when I died, she didn't even shed a single tear. It wasn't heartbreak, it was relief. The news of the broken engagement spread like a bomb, exploding across both families' social circles. That night, my mom's call came in, her voice so sharp it almost pierced my eardrums. Lucas. Have you lost your mind? Celeste is such a great girl. She barely agreed to give the engagement a try, and you want to break up now? How is her family supposed to save face? How is your father supposed to save face? Then came the messages from Celeste's circle of friends, one after another, questioning and blaming me. In their eyes, I was nothing but a lapdog at Celeste's beck and call, the kind that would never dare to bite through the leash and run off on its own. I sat on the sofa of my bachelor apartment, watching the stream of insults and persuasion pop up on my phone, my heart as calm as still water. I thought back to my previous life, when Celeste's mother openly mocked me at a dinner party for having too many schemes and marrying above my station. Celeste just sat there quietly cutting her steak, never uttering a single word in my defense. In his past life, Lucas threw his dignity to the ground and let others trample on it for the sake of that pitiful amount of love. Lucas, you've disappointed me so much. Colin posted a status on his social media account, with a picture of Celeste sitting alone in a corner of the bar, her face pale in profile. I let out a cold laugh and directly blocked all contact methods of Colin and Celeste. Along the way, I also cleaned out those so-called friends who tried to boss me around. In this life, no more being a doormat. Celeste didn't give up. But she started sending me texts from different numbers, or even calling from the office landline. I ignored every single one. A week later, my good friend Wayne invited me out for a drink. As soon as we met, he looked at me with a complicated expression, hesitating to speak. I lit a cigarette and said calmly, "If you have something to say, just say it. Don't act like an old woman." Wayne sighed and pushed his phone in front of me. "Lucas, are you serious this time? Look at Celeste, her condition has been terrifying lately. At a party yesterday, she got completely drunk, calling out your name between drinks. Her best friend said she hasn't been able to sleep for several nights in a row, and she's already looking gaunt." In the photo on the screen, Celeste was wearing a black trench coat, her figure appearing even thinner than before. Those eyes, once always proud and aloof, were now swollen and red like two walnuts, radiating a sense of despair on the verge of collapse. A faint, almost imperceptible pang struck the tip of my heart, stirring a trace of reluctance. But that reluctance was quickly swept away by the searing pain of my chest bursting open during the car accident in my past life. When she and Colin went abroad in my past life, did she ever think that I would lie awake night after night in the cold rain? I exhaled a puff of smoke and turned my phone face down on the table. That's her business. Don't bring up anything about her to me from now on. Lucas, don't be soft. Remember the cold you felt when you died. Because of a government-bid park landscape design project, I, as the chief designer, had no choice but to go to Celeste's group for a proposal presentation. I knew I would run into her, but I didn't plan to avoid it. In the meeting room, Celeste sat at the head of the table. She had put on heavy makeup today, but it still couldn't hide the dark circles and exhaustion under her eyes. The moment she saw me walk in, her eyes lit up. That look, like a drowning person grabbing a floating branch, made me feel somewhat uncomfortable. "Mr. Lucas, here's your coffee," Celeste's assistant handed me an iced Americano. "Wait." Celeste suddenly spoke, her voice a bit hoarse. She stood up, snatched the iced Americano, and handed it to her assistant. "Switch it to a hot latte. With extra sugar." The executives in the meeting room were stunned. I raised an eyebrow. In my previous life, I forced myself to drink iced Americano for 3 years just to match Celeste's taste, even if it meant taking medicine for the stomach pain. And she never knew that I actually hate bitterness, preferring only sweet, hot lattes. Now she knows, but I no longer need it. No need to bother. I calmly took a cup out of my bag, offering a polite and distant smile. I brought my own water. "Shall we start reviewing the proposal?" Celeste's hand froze mid-air, the hot latte feeling like a huge joke. The light in her eyes gradually dimmed, and she bit her lip as she sat back down. Throughout the entire meeting, she didn't take in a single word, just stared intently at my fingers tapping on the keyboard. The Lucas from the past life was humble and ingratiating, the Lucas of this life was professionally clear-headed. Late at night, 11 o'clock. A torrential downpour. I had just finished working overtime at the studio and pulled open the main door, only to find a figure huddled in the corner of the office building's lobby. It was Celeste. She was soaked through, clutching a lunchbox wrapped in an insulated bag tightly in her hands, shivering from the cold. Seeing me come out, her eyes lit up, and she stumbled over to me. "Lucas, you're finally off work." Trembling, she held out the lunchbox to me, her eyes filled with a humble, almost pleading look. "This is stomach-nourishing porridge I made myself. I practiced for a long time, and the heat is just right. You have a weak stomach, so don't go hungry." I looked at the lunchbox, and a strong sense of irony welled up inside me. In my past life, on countless stormy nights, I was the one who cooked porridge and brought it to her office, only to be met with a dismissive, "Just leave it there, I'm not hungry." Now, the tables have turned, and she too has tasted what it's like to wait bitterly in the cold wind. A violent surge stirred within me, and for a moment, I wanted to ask her, "If you knew this day would come, why did you do it in the first place?" But I held myself back. "Celeste, don't bother with these meaningless things." I didn't take the lunchbox, opened my umbrella, and stepped into the rain. "I'm not hungry, and I don't need it. Go back. This doesn't mean anything." The rain instantly drowned out her sobs. I heard the lunchbox drop behind me, its soup spilling all over the ground. In this life, don't mistake belated affection for redemption. 3 days later, I was stopped by Colin in the parking lot downstairs from my studio. "Lucas, don't be ungrateful." He looked utterly indignant, pointing at my nose and shouting, "Celeste hasn't eaten or drunk for days because of you. She's in the hospital on an 4 drip. Who do you think you are? Just a draftsman, and you're putting on airs with her? Back when you clung to her like a dog, why weren't you so aloof then?" I looked at Colin's face, the same face I had loathed to the core in my past life, and the pent-up fury from 2 lifetimes finally found an outlet. I stepped forward, grabbed him by the collar, and slammed him hard against a concrete pillar. "Colin, do you really think I don't know what you're up to?" I sneered, my voice dropping to a low growl, like a beast awakening. "In my past life, no, a few years ago, you played the innocent guy friend in front of Celeste, but behind her back, you deliberately deleted the texts I sent her, stirred up trouble when she was upset, and even leaked her schedule to the media, didn't you?" Colin's face instantly turned pale, a flicker of extreme panic flashing in his eyes. You're talking nonsense. Get lost." I shoved him away, wiping my hands in disgust. "Don't come near me again, you piece of trash. Otherwise, the evidence of you secretly transferring Celeste Company's assets will be on her desk tomorrow." Colin collapsed to the ground, not daring to utter a single word of rebuttal. The feeling of being clear-headed was fucking amazing. Having shaken off the toxic people and mess from the past, my life and career began to explode. My design proposal for the coastal park won first place, making me a dark horse in the industry. To celebrate, Wayne dragged me to the largest creative market in City A to unwind. It was there that I met Flora. "Hey, handsome, move aside, my giant cactus is about to fall." With a crisp exclamation, a girl in bright yellow overalls with a high ponytail, carrying a potted succulent nearly as tall as herself, came charging straight toward me. Quick as a flash, I reached out and steadily caught the edge of the pot. The girl looked up, revealing a radiant, energetic smile. Her eyes curved into crescent moons, a fine sheen of sweat on her forehead, and she exuded a sunflower-like vitality and warmth. "Wow, that was close. Thanks a lot, you're really strong." She patted her chest and casually extended her hand toward me. "I'm Flora, an independent landscape designer here. Nice to meet you." She and Celeste were complete opposites. Celeste was an unapproachable, ever-elusive iceberg, while Flora was a direct, unreserved, and blazing sun. Looking at her cloudless smile, the tightly wound strings of my heart seemed to finally relax in that moment. "Lucas, it felt like a new life was truly about to begin." Being with Flora was a kind of ease I had never experienced in either of my 2 lifetimes. She would drag me to street stalls for spicy hot pot, twirl around on the street without a care when a design drawing was approved by a client, and after discovering my love for sweets, she would tuck a White Rabbit creamy candy on my desk every day. She never made me guess what she was thinking. Whatever she wanted, whatever she craved, she always expressed it in the most direct way. "Lucas, the weather is so nice today, let's go fly a kite." Flora leaned over my desk, her eyes sparkling. "Sure." I closed the blueprints, smiled, and gently ruffled her hair. But as we walked out of the office building side by side, we ran into Celeste, holding a bouquet of white roses in her hands. Celeste watched the intimate interaction between me and Flora, as if struck by lightning. The roses in her hand fell to the ground, petals scattering everywhere. "Lucas, who is she?" Celeste's voice trembled, tears instantly streaming down her face. "Is it because of her that you don't want me anymore?" Flora paused, keenly sensing the tension in the air, but she didn't back down. Instead, she stood firmly by my side and took my hand. The warmth from her palm brought me immense peace of mind. "Celeste, she is Flora, my friend, and perhaps something more in the future." I looked at her calmly. "Also, the reason I broke up with you is simply that I don't love you anymore. It has nothing to do with anyone else." Celeste stared at our tightly clasped hands, suddenly collapsing to the ground in a crouch, sobbing loudly. Her cries were filled with regret and despair. But in my heart, there was only a faint, subtle sigh. The cheerfulness of a new love had completely washed away the gloom of the old one. My relationship with Flora was heating up quickly, and the ambiguous barrier between us was just one last opportunity away from being broken. However, at this critical moment, Celeste's mother suddenly called me. On the phone, that once arrogant noblewoman set aside all her pride and begged me tearfully, "Lucas, I'm begging you, please go to the hospital to see Ching Ching. She has severe depression, with tendencies towards self-harm. She's locked herself in the hospital room, refusing to see anyone, and keeps muttering your name. The doctor says she has serious suicidal tendencies." After hanging up, I sat in my office, sinking into a long silence. Memories of my past life flashed before my eyes like a revolving lantern. Celeste's coldness, Colin's instigation, and that tragic car accident. But now, she was about to commit suicide for me. This stark contrast left me momentarily bewildered. If I didn't go and she actually died, would I be burdened with a moral guilt for the rest of my life? "Lucas, what's wrong with you?" Flora pushed the door open, holding 2 theater tickets in her hand. The moment she saw my grim expression, the smile on her face instantly faded. She obediently sat down beside me and held my cold hand. Looking into her clear eyes, I decided not to hide anything from her anymore and told her the whole story from beginning to end. "Lucas, don't run away. You need to make a decision." After listening to my story, Flora didn't show any sign of jealousy. She just listened quietly, her warm hands tightly wrapped around mine. After a long moment, she let out a soft sigh, reached out to smooth my furrowed brow, and smiled gently. "Lucas, go ahead." I was stunned, looking at her in disbelief. "Flora, you..." Flora looked straight into my eyes, her gaze full of trust and magnanimity. "I know you don't still love her, you just can't get past that hurdle in your heart. If you don't go see her, she'll become a shadow over you for the rest of your life. I want my Lucas to be completely free and happy. Go make a real break with the past. I'll be here waiting for you to come back." At that moment, my heart felt as if it had been completely soaked in a pool of warm spring water. In my past life, I groveled and fawned over someone who would never respond to me. In this life, how fortunate I am to have met a girl who understands me, trusts me, and heals me so deeply. "Okay, I'll be back." I gently placed a kiss on Flora's forehead. This time, it wasn't to rekindle an old flame, but to draw a clean conclusion to both of my lives. In this life, having Flora by my side is truly wonderful. The hospital room was filled with the pungent smell of disinfectant. Celeste lay on the bed, her face deathly pale, her wrists wrapped in thick bandages. She was so thin she seemed to have lost all shape, like a white rose on the verge of withering. When she saw me push the door open, a startling light burst into her lifeless eyes. "Lucas! You came to see me. You still care about me, don't you?" She struggled to sit up, tears streaming uncontrollably. Standing at a safe distance 2 meters from the hospital bed, I didn't approach, my voice as calm as an ancient well. "Celeste, I only came because your mother begged me to. Take care of yourself, don't torment yourself anymore." Celeste suddenly broke down, covering her face and sobbing heart-wrenchingly. "Lucas, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I know I was wrong. Colin exploited my psychological trauma to drive us apart. I didn't mean to be cold to you. My parents divorced when I was young, and I have severe intimacy issues. The kinder someone is to me, the more I want to run away, to protect myself with coldness. I thought you would never leave, that I could slowly heal myself and then love you. I really didn't know I would hurt you this deeply. So that was the truth. A truth that came 2 lifetimes too late. She did not love me, she was sick, and with Colin's encouragement, she pushed me away in the most hurtful way. Watching her in such agony, I felt a flicker of pity and relief. The misunderstanding was cleared, the truth was out, but I realized that inside me, there wasn't a single ripple left. After my heart died, any further explanation was nothing more than a ripple on stagnant water. "Lucas, you no longer belong here." Celeste reached out her hand, crying, trying to grab the hem of my clothes. "Lucas, can we start over? I'll see a therapist, I'll change, I'll definitely learn how to love you." I gently stepped back, avoiding her touch. "Celeste, there's no need." I looked at her, and the obsessions, resentments, and regrets accumulated over 2 lifetimes completely vanished in that moment. I don't hate Colin, and I don't hate you anymore. In my past life, no, what happened before, it's all in the past. I took a deep breath and let out a relieved smile. But I can't start over with you. Because the Lucas who was willing to cross half the city to bring you porridge, who was willing to wait for you in the rain all night, has already died in that unreachable past. Celeste stood frozen in place, her outstretched hand falling limply to her side. Now, I have my own life, and someone I want to protect with all my might. I gave her one last look. "Celeste, live well, get your illness treated. I don't hate you, but I don't love you anymore either." After saying that, I turned around without hesitation and strode out of the ward. Behind me came Celeste's suppressed and desperate sobs, yet my steps had never felt as light as they did now. It wasn't the thrill of revenge, it was the clarity of letting go completely. Stepping out of the hospital gate, the glaring sunlight fell on my face. I looked up and saw, under the camphor tree not far away, a girl in bright yellow clothes idly kicking at the stones by the roadside. As if sensing my gaze, Flora suddenly looked up. Seeing me come out, a smile brighter than the sun immediately bloomed on her face, and she rushed toward me like a cheerful little bird. "All settled?" She stopped steadily in front of me, tilting her head to ask. "Yeah, it's over." I reached out and pulled her tightly into my arms, my chin resting on the top of her head as I greedily breathed in the pleasant scent of sunshine on her. "Flora, will you be my girlfriend?" I whispered softly in her ear. Flora's body stiffened for a moment, then she wrapped her arms tightly around my waist, nuzzled against my chest, and said with joy that couldn't be hidden in her voice, "You idiot, I've been waiting to hear that for so long." A month later, I received a text message on my phone from an unfamiliar number. It was Celeste. "Lucas, I've been cooperating with the doctors for treatment, and Colin has been sent to prison by my mom. I'm working hard to get better. I wish you and her happiness." I looked at the text message, smiled faintly, didn't reply, and casually deleted the record. The light boat has already passed through 10,000 mountains. In this life, look forward, the days are still long. A few months later. At the largest landscape design award ceremony in City A, I successfully won the Best New Designer of the Year award for my Bin High Park project. The spotlight shone on my face, and thunderous applause erupted from the audience. In the most prominent spot below the stage, Flora was wildly waving her hands, smiling even more joyfully than I, the award winner. Standing on the podium, holding the heavy trophy, and looking at Flora in the audience, my mind suddenly drifted for a moment. I remembered my past life, the Lucas who died alone, covered in blood, in a freezing car during a rainstorm. How pitiful and hopeless I was back then. But now, I have a successful career, a partner who understands and loves me, and my life is filled with sunshine and laughter. This rebirth that God gave me was not meant for me to seek revenge with resentment, but to help me realize that there are so many beautiful things in life worth cherishing and embracing. I held the microphone, my gaze fixed firmly on that girl. I want to thank my team, and even more, my fiancée, Flora. It was she who helped me rediscover the soul of design and find the meaning of life. Flora's face instantly flushed, but she smiled with immense happiness. The regrets of her past life were finally fulfilled in this one. On a weekend afternoon, the sunlight was just right. The balcony of Flora's and my new home was filled with all kinds of oddly shaped succulents. Lucas! Come help! This pot of Ionium is too heavy. Flora, wearing an apron, shouted loudly on the balcony. I smiled helplessly, put down the spatula in my hand, walked to the balcony, and skillfully wrapped my arms around her from behind while taking the heavy flower pot from her hands. How many times have I told you, leave the heavy work to me? I said, playfully tapping her nose. Hee, with my husband around, I don't have to exert any effort. Flora turned around, wrapped her arms around my neck, and gave me a loud kiss on the lips. Then, like a cat that had successfully stolen a treat, she giggled and ran back to the living room. Soft music was playing in the living room, and the pork rib soup simmering in the kitchen was sending up steam, filling the entire house with the warm, comforting scent of everyday life. Standing on the balcony, gazing at the blue sky and white clouds, I silently said a single sentence to the version of myself that was once covered in scars. In my past life, I thank you for the lesson you bought with your life. In this life, I will no longer let myself down.